Hello everyone, Satorn here. I put together a quick spreadsheet for Vicky 3 regarding the industrial evolution throughout a playthrough. Usually these are all the resources that you're going to be worrying about. Ones that are in green are critical, and we'll go through those. And I have the different text that you're needed for each one. And this is generally what I would go through in most of my games. Again, the order may change depending on goals or events that happen in the game, but this is a generic way of kind of looking at it and getting an idea, okay, these are the type of things I need when. So let's get into it. Before we go into detail with the spreadsheet, I'll explain how it's set up. So from top to bottom is the progression throughout the game. So that's your evolution. The B column or the second column is standard of living. So all of those are used by your pops. Industry, those resources are used by your industry, military, and then administration. And then the last column is your tech, and those are required to be able to use those goods. So any of the resources that are in green are critical resources, ones that I think you're going to need throughout the game. Again, they may trail off in the number that you need it, but you're still going to require it. So wood is the first one. No tech is required. You're going to need that no matter what. So either you're going to have to trade for these resources or you're going to have to make them. But for sure, wood is going to be important. Services as well. All of your pops are going to need it, and that we have that under the standard of living. So that'll happen automatically with urban centers, and early on you'll be using wood. Basic food, grain, fish, fruit, meat, they should all be available as well because enclosure is an early tech that I think every nation has. So you should be straight there. I would say at least one or two of those would be good enough. Toxicants, you only need one of these, so either liquor, tobacco, or opium. Tobacco or opium is easier if you got these fields, but in some cases you won't, so then you have to go liquor, and liquor is a little bit harder to make. Fabric is extremely important. It's used, again, and everything is pretty much critical. That's why I have it in green. Again, enclosure with either a ranch or a cotton plantation should be able to give you enough fabric early on. Then we can start looking into the Navy. So clippers and man of wars, again, navigation really early on. You should have that no problem as long as you've got wooden fabric, which are the earlier ones. These should be fine. And I don't really consider these critical. I mean, they're needed if you want to get some trade routes or if you want to do some early Navy, but I wouldn't say it's critical. Tools are 100%. So this is kind of your first big industrial urban building that I would say tool industry is totally fine to start and use wood pretty much primarily to get this going. And I would do this definitely early, especially if you want to get the people some well-paying jobs. Iron is huge. You're going to need iron for everything, especially even for building and construction. Once you get the iron frame, that iron is going to be used so much. Shaft mining, again, you should have that really early. Again, I think most nations will have this, so it's no problem. But you do need the tools earlier to be able to get the iron. Hardwood's not needed as much, so again, not critical. You'll need that later on for your arms industry, and you can see here, so small arms and artillery is when hardwood really comes in. But I have paper before that, and it's critical because you really do need it for all your admin stuff. You're going to need a ton of paper as time goes on, and it could get quite expensive. So I would say that's probably your next industry that you could do is like tools, and I would say paper would definitely be next. Small arms or the arms industry, right, to create your arms and artillery, I think is okay. You need gunsmithing and artillery. These you might not have early on in your nation, especially if you're low tech. So these would have to be researched. But I would say this industry is very expensive, so it can be kind of hard to get going. I would recommend definitely tools and paper before that. Then you have glass, clothes, and furniture all under manufactories. These are definitely needed by your pops. Also, your industry, both of them are, well, actually, all of them are used. The reason why I have them in industry is because you have your clothes, but then you got luxury clothes and furniture, and the luxury furniture later on. But glass is used in your urban centers that you'll do. People do use them, and then as well, glass is going to be needed in your industry. So glass is actually a pretty easy one to start as well. I would almost do that definitely before if you need to. If you need to go to war, of course, go for your small arms and artillery. If you're not, then I would definitely skip these. Glass, you can just use wood, and you can make that, and that would be totally fine. Luxury drinks are next. Not super important, but having one that your culture likes, either tea, coffee, or wine, would be good to have. Then I would start looking for sulfur. Sulfur is very good to be making more paper because you're going to probably need it by then. You're going to also need it later on for some explosives with your fertilizer. So this is going to be needed. Can't hurt to have a little bit coming in. I would then focus on sugar, whether you got to trade for it, you grow it yourself to get your groceries, because groceries are definitely good. I wouldn't say they're critical, but they definitely increase your standard of living. People are no longer eating grain and meat. Now they get some nice fatty foods that they could eat. Silk would be next. Again, this could be kind of skipped and moved later on. I did have it later on in the chart here. But I mean, having luxury furniture and clothes are good. And if you're taxing these are good to make. However, they're not really needed, and that's why they're also not green. Later on, you can wait on this. So it's really up to you, this choice. I would say, though, coal, steel, and engines are huge. You're going to be using coal in everything. You definitely need coal to be able to make steel. Coal will be used for heating. Coal is it's used a lot. Like coal if you thought wood was a lot, coal is going to be even more. The same thing for steel. You're going to be using even more iron just to make the steel. So iron again becomes even more important. And then with that steel, you're going to be making engines, and engines are used in so many things as time goes on. And you can see that here, as we evolve, I changed kind of the background color here to show there's a big shift in your economy and in your industry. Once you get atmospheric engine, you start producing engines, a lot of things change. After engines, I'd start worrying about transportation and railways, because your infrastructure is probably going to be pretty bad, or your ports might be maxed out, and you just need this. If your industry is behind, maybe you won't, but this is when I definitely start thinking about railways. You won't need a ton, but just to kind of get started. The transportation is kind of good because not only is it infrastructure, it does help with your standard of living and your freedom of movement. So it's not a bad thing to start doing. Dye, I'd start picking this up as well. It'll help out, I think, with porcelain as you go later on. Lead, you definitely want to pick up this, whether you can, again, trade for this or definitely have your own mines. I would start looking for land if you don't, because you're going to want this, and you're going to see here the next green one is ammunition. So lead is definitely needed here. So I'd like to start worrying about this and getting this into my plan. Porcelain's okay. It's nothing to really care about too much. Again, standard of living. Again, I deprioritize that compared to everything else. So to me, it's not as important. But then fertilizer and explosives is definitely huge because that leads to ammunition. So fertilizer you might have already been doing with some of your farms and things like that. So this might not be too bad, but you do need the chemical plants to be able to make the explosives. And then that's with nitroglycerin, and then you can get your ammunitions, but you got to get percussion cap over in the military tech tree. So this is really your next line of all your infantry is going to be using ammunition and your future vehicles. So this is going to be really important and why it's green. Next is electricity, a big game changer. You can see here I changed the color again. Your industry will change because a lot of production methods will open up, and you're going to need a ton of engines, and you can start seeing where your industry sort of feeds into one another. So if we need more engines, what does that mean? We need more steel, and if we need more steel, we need more iron and coal. So it's just crazy, how it works. It's just going to snowball on one another. So you got to keep that in mind. But electricity is definitely very good, and your people start to become reliant on it for heat. So they're going to not want coal and wood as much. So it's very interesting. Then the next group is your steamers and your ironclads. So this is tier 3. So again, in tech, I wouldn't worry about it too much, but this is if you need more convoys, or again, if you're having a lot of naval battles, this is important. Fine art is a very interesting one. I have this a lot lower, and I didn't realize it was really romanticism, and it's you get this really early. So let me know in the comments below if you guys actually do this. And I can see here that the art academies give a lot of academics. So it's pretty good for your interest groups if you're trying to increase your intelligentsia fast. So I was kind of interested in this. So let me know if anyone uses that in their gameplay. Then we got rubber. This isn't used too much until later because it's a discoverable resource. The same thing for oil, and there's fixing this in the latest patch, so we'll have to see how all that's going to work out. But yeah, rubber isn't needed as much. I would say oil is definitely more important, and you can get this with pump jack technology when you get there, and that's kind of, I would say, your last critical resource. It's going to be one that you're going to start needing a ton of because literally it is the fuel of the future. Moving on to telephone, and the last tier pretty much of all of our resources, I would say, is heavily favored into military and then a little bit into standard of living, even though these are definitely the higher valued ones. So I would say you don't have to rush to these right away either. So I definitely, a lot of these are more important. This is going to be the bulk. Everything we talked about before is going to be the bulk pretty much of your industry. You're going to have a lot of these. And here, yeah, you'll have a decent amount probably depending on the size of your nation. But you're not going to go crazy unless you're taking over the world. So telephone's good, automobiles are good, and airplanes are good. Definitely for, your military, these just makes everything super strong. You have tanks, and then you have a lot of Navy at the back end here. You have destroyers, submarines, dreadnought, battleships, and carriers. So it's kind of like all of a sudden your Navy just explodes with different types. I think this might get spread out a little bit more or something. I don't know. Balance-wise, it feels weird. But yeah, again, I don't consider any of these critical. If you guys disagree, put it down in the comments. And I think radio is definitely, pretty good because it's, again, an increase in standard of living and is needed for a lot of these to build these out. I hope you all found this video useful. If you find the spreadsheet useful, let me know, and maybe I'll make it public. Put it down in the comments below. Hit that like, subscribe, and notification button. They're free. And as always,
for the swarm.